First, let's talk about Amendment 601. The Greater Houston area was hit not once, but 3 times in 3 years by historic flooding. We had floods on Memorial Day of 2015, floods on Tax Day of 2016, and of course, Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Almost 2 years later, we're still working hard to recover from these floods. And right now, we're closely monitoring Tropical Storm Barry as it grows and forms off the Florida Panhandle in the Gulf of Mexico as I speak. This is normal life on the Gulf Coast, as my colleagues on the committee from Florida and Georgia know. The overwhelming majority of deaths during a hurricane occur as the rains are coming down and the storm surge hits. Parts of Texas in my district had 5 feet of rain over 2 days in Hurricane Harvey. The routes for assistance on the road were flooded. Airdrops are extremely limiting. The best way to save lives in these disasters is to empower local first responders before the disaster hits with the equipment they need. The 1033 program of surplus military vehicles to local communities does just that. Small cities like Simonton, Rocheron, and Pearland in Texas 22 are begging for high water vehicles to help during times of extreme flooding. As you know from past experience on the Gulf Coast, it's not a matter of if, but when the next flood or hurricane hits. A few examples of the value of the 1033 program. Alvin, Texas got some high-wheeled vehicles 10 years before, so they were prepared when Harvey hit. This is an example of a vehicle they have. Pearland, Texas, which is 5 times as large, could not get a vehicle through 1033, and so they sent out 3 fire trucks to help people in floods. As you see, the vehicle that Alvin had has a very high wheel and the doors of access way above the wheels. The fire truck has the same high wheels, but the doors are below the level of the wheels. These 2 fire trucks, 2 of 3, were flooded. They were recovered, but they'll have problems forever because contamination of all the electronics during the flood. And that's why I drafted amendment number 601. It's a straightforward amendment which will save lives in many of our communities in a life-threatening time of need. This amendment would add the words disaster-related emergency preparedness to the current list of priorities for the 1033 program. And I'm aware that the 1033 program causes legitimate concerns that our military is acting as law enforcement in times of civil disorder and other issues, in clear violation of the posse comitatus law. This amendment would simply allow disaster communities who desperately have to have these high-wheel vehicles to compete with the highest priority for disaster rescue vehicles instead of only those priorities going to civil disobedience and drug task force issues, situations. And this is not just for hurricanes. Rivers have flooded Arkansas, Oklahoma. There are snow avalanches, earthquakes in rural California this past weekend, still ongoing. I think the best value of 1033 is for vehicles in disaster, not so much for civil disorder or drug issues. This ensures these vehicles can be sent out where they are most needed. And thank you for the time to express my positions on this amendment. And if I take your questions, I've got one more Shall I go through that, Chairman, first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Next one is Amendment 517. In the NDAA of 2005, Congress created a program to allow the Department of Energy's NNSA to pick up certain old radioactive material that was used by industry. We're not talking about nuclear power plant fuel. This is not Yucca Mountain, not Yucca Mountain. Instead, there's a very small amount of radioactive material like americium that's used by the oil and gas industry, or plutonium-238 that's used in pacemakers like I have. Small containers of this waste are all across the United States. In fact, on a site 1/2 mile from my son's high school, there is this material stored for all eternity. Because industry needs a safe way to dispose of used nuclear materials, we tasked DOE's NNSA to pick them up and bring them to a site called WIPP in New Mexico. It's safe and firmly established. But there's a flaw. The 2005 NDAA only allows these industrial containers to be picked up by the NNSA if the fuel was mined in America. But we found out there's a small portion of these materials that were mined overseas. It's identical. The same elements, used in the same ways by the same companies here in America. But because they're mined overseas, DOE cannot pick them up, leaving all these canisters across the country to do harm with types of cancer exposure to radiation. Our duty here is to make sure our public is safe and secure. And sadly, we failed them with this 2005 rule. According to DOE, states like Massachusetts, New York, California, and North Carolina, and my own state of Texas have small containers of spent nuclear material just sitting in industrial parks waiting for a solution. That's the exact situation at my son's high school. It's not just a headache for industry. NNSA says some of these are literally a dirty bomb waiting to happen if this material is stolen by bad actors. And that's why Secretary Perry asked us to fix this. And most importantly, it's a very small fix. Bring the extra identical fuel to WIPP in New Mexico would add an extra 6 cubic meters a year to the WIPP. That is 0.001% of the site's capacity. It's a small amount of what already goes there. For this reason, Representative Fort Berry, along with myself and a bipartisan group of sponsors, offered Amendment 517. Again, thank you for your time to discuss why this amendment is needed. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much.